What's up, T-Tam fam? Happy Sunday. It's 7 a.m. on November 2nd, 2025. Now, earlier in the week, I had released a special episode about my breakup with my girlfriend. And it was coming on, I come to find out it was basically 2 years and a day since we had met. That was kind of the final day. As of this morning, I still haven't reached out. We've returned each other's belongings. Um, but, I'm still going to, this is my way of processing through um, everything, that has happened because I had, put in, um, I put in everything into this relationship. So I want to get it out. So bear with me here, right? Um, you know, this episode, the hardest part isn't losing them. It's losing the daily you shared. Now let me put that into perspective. You don't realize how much space someone takes up and their silence becomes your new routine, right? So this is about emotional contrast, the quiet that follows the constant presence. When you sit there and you go into doing things every single day, talking to them, texting them, seeing them, holding them, hugging them, kissing them, laughing with them, crying with them, um, being their emotional support person, them being your emotional support person. So I mean, with me, I have an open heart. I love with all of my being. And it's a pro and a con, right? Because when things are good, hey, you know what? Things are awesome. But when they're bad or things get tough, like I know personally, like I can push through. I can push through anything. That's just my mentality. Um, Unfortunately, it really wasn't kind of. It wasn't enough. Um, and there was nothing that I could do to change that. When you're in a relationship, you're not there to fix that person. I want to say that again. You're not there to fix that person. That is on themselves to fix themselves. You did not create past traumas. Initially, now I'm talking about like the very beginning. Like, hey, you got any, is there anything about you that I should know? Well, I've gone through X, Y, and Z. And it's your job not to fix them. Your job is to support them in any way possible, like how they see fit. Some may say, hey, listen, don't bring it up again. Some may say, this is how I deal with it. Are you cool with that? So you kind of have to understand that about your partner. And that is one thing that I tried to do. Um, and I grew into. First I started to fix. Then I realized that I couldn't fix. It wasn't my job to fix. So I tried to be, I was the support person, but I also needed reciprocation from her um, to give me that. And that's one I did not get until it was, too late. But going back to the power of the daily, the texts, the messages, the routines, the check-ins, inside jokes, it wasn't just love you lost. It was rhythm, right? And your body gets used to that rhythm. It gets into, this mode of, what, will you wake up, you shoot them a text, or you give them a call, or you get ready for work, and then you shoot them a text or give them a call. Those little moments, that I guess you take for granted. Um, because it's something where you think it's always going to be there. And now that it's gone, as they say, the silence is deafening. In my case, it definitely, it's something that I missed. Um, you know, Wednesday morning, specifically, I can remember around lunchtime that we would call each other every single day at my lunch, and we would talk, whether it was 2 minutes or an hour. She was working, I was working, but you know, we were still actively working, but also making time for each other and talking with each other. Um, and I miss those. I miss that. That was a fun part of my day because it got to break me away from my work, even though I was actively working, multitasking. Um, but I was able to find out about her day and some of the things, um, that were going on with her. So, and she would find out about my day, but it was a way for us to connect. Um, and that's one thing that, I miss. So, you know, the one thing is that, talking about an emotional echo, right, is where your heart hasn't yet caught up to your mind's logic. Now, you know that at this moment, um, that you're not with your partner, that your body knows something's wrong, and it goes through, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna say withdrawals, you know, um, because you get used to that. It's something that it made you happy. You felt that connection between them, and now that's gone. And your heart wants it back. They're like, hey, bring this back. And your mind's saying, listen, dude, it's gone. She's gone. You know what I mean? You have to move on from that, but it takes takes some time. It takes effort. It takes discipline. It takes rewiring um, yourself to say, hey, listen, you know, um, she's not there and she's not coming back. So you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward. Because one thing that's true in this world, besides death and taxes, is is life doesn't stop, and it doesn't matter whether you are having the greatest moment of your life or the worst moment of your life. It does not stop. So you know, mentally, it's over, right? But your emotions still wait for the voice at the same time every day, right? Just like my call. That's one thing that um, was was there for me. You miss their smell, you miss their touch, you miss their laugh, you miss their voice. Um, there is there's quite a bit of everything um, that you notice about your partner. You miss the way that they walk, how they handled certain things. What made them happy, what made them sad, and honestly, it's when you have the ache of missing someone who's still alive, it's just distance, and that distance creates um, that space. There's a lot of stuff going around about no contact and giving people space. And for this relationship, I did that. I hadn't done it previously because I didn't believe in it. However, because of the unconventional style that we had started with, um, that I was open to new ways, and I can personally tell you that I will not be doing that going forward. Lesson learned, because that space just creates distance. And if you can't find somebody that um, can't come to a resolution with you within, you know, an hour or so, unless it's all right. So here's the thing: when it comes down to, and people are probably going to get mad when it comes down to small things, right? And I don't take any of it lightly because it is all valid. But there is how I perceive it is there's certain levels. There's small things, and then there's large things, right? Large things are, um, you know, infidelity, lying. So, um, you kind of want to, um, not being, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna say like infidelity, really. It's kind of that's like a big one. But small things like to me can be worked through, and it starts with a simple question, um, which is like, hey, something's not sitting right with me. Can we talk about it? Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about it. And you get that out of your system, and you find a resolution, and that's how you continue to move forward. Um, is finding that is, and and a lot of the things, are can be forgiven. They'll never be forgotten. Let me be clear: is they'll never be forgotten, and I get that, and that's why past traumas, that people have experienced, have a difficult time with because anytime you trigger them unintentionally, you get brought into what occurred to them in the past, right? And it could be something small, like in unintentional, but it still sends them into a tailspin, and that is a very, very difficult um, thing to navigate from from my perspective. You know, now, what I've done, you know, since the breakup is learning to live without those daily touch points, you know, and it's trying, excuse me, it's trying not to think about it. It's trying to keep myself occupied. It's trying to grow. Like I've done a lot of reflection about our relationship and what I could have done or what I couldn't have done and all of that. And the one thing is that healing isn't instant. It's learning to sit in the silence without expecting their sound, right? And it's just like you can't go, oh, why me, why me, why me. um, don't take that approach, because at the end of the day you could do almost everything right and it still not be a match, right? So the one thing that silence has done is forced me to rediscover my own voice again. And that's why I use this vlog, this podcast, to be able to say that. But I'm also using this to try and, to continue to work on myself and continue to grow, because what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, right? And I've always kind of had that mentality because I've dealt with a lot of heartbreak in the past, and um, I live to tell the tale, right? So, um, with this is sad and as disappointed I was with the outcome. Hey, this was something that I don't regret any of it, and simply because I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about um, my ex-girlfriend and how she handled things, and taking those and taking the good and the bad, and you know really kind of cherishing the good that came out of that relationship, but also focusing on the bad, on stuff that I have to be more mindful of, going forward when it comes to relationships. um, so it's really kind of redefining my new constant, right? So that can be journaling. I've continued to journal throughout this whole thing, um, but also keeping a digital copy. Really kind of putting my efforts into the gym, which that hasn't changed. Still going to go to the gym, um, you know, 4 or 5 times a week, um, because that does help, especially on heavy barbell days. Love it. It's a great motivator. Putting more time into my daughter, making sure that she's going to grow up an independent, young woman that is ready to take on the world. Um, and then ultimately finding my own peace. You know, what what can I do that um, gives me my peace? So, you know, the three things I've kind of talked about throughout this podcast since the beginning is consistency, presence, and follow through. And learning about those. Consistency to me is It's key. It's up there. It's how you achieve. It's how you achieve your certain goals that you want to accomplish. Right? Is being consistent, and you have to have that come within. Excuse me, come from within. And if you have that mindset and you set yourself up with small goals, excuse me, that are achievable, you will get there, 100%. Um, but the thing is, you know, maybe the point isn't to replace what you lost, but to rebuild what you forgot, right? So, you can sit there and say, I miss this and I miss that and I want this and I want that, but, and you're going to try and do something of, and when it comes to relationships, some people jump into another relationship because it's a good distraction. Well, that was me in my 20s. Me in my 40s, no. Now this is a time for, really kind of self-reflection, you know, um, going over, I think, growing, internally, because we all need the work, whether it's physical, whether it's mental. Um, it doesn't hurt you to continue to grow um, on a scale that is going to be beneficial to you. So there are silver linings when it comes down to it, even though those days are the initial quote unquote punch in the face is tough, but at the end of it, it's you have to do that work yourself. So when you come out of this, you are bigger, stronger, faster, and more aware of what you want truthfully. And ideally, like you know, I had wants, um, coming into this relationship, and honestly, I thought it was going to be my last relationship. That's how it started out. Truly, it was a movie, and um, and for it to end that way, excuse me, for it to end the way that it did, hey, you know, it just clearly wasn't in the cards. Um, and that's something I have to accept, and I have accepted it. I've also forgiven my ex-girlfriend, and I've forgiven myself because you know you anytime you forgive a person who has you know it's gonna be a bad term, but done you dirty, you know, and that's happened. Um, I forgave my ex-wife for everything that occurred in my um, in in my marriage. I've also forgiven, um, myself for when I was drinking, and because I carried a lot of burden, I carried a lot of weight, unnecessary weight on me for a long, long time, and then once I forgave, that weight was lifted. And so, yes, I did forgive her, and I forgave myself because I'm going to move forward. That's the only way that we can do it, is to move forward consistently. Um, Kind of, some closing reflections here. The hardest part isn't losing them, it's losing who you were with them. But eventually, you meet the version of yourself again, stronger, right? I've had, I have a lot of patience, and I always continue to have a lot of patience. Um, and that's a good thing and a bad thing is, I process a lot, but I also wait far too long, um, in some capacity. So, when you're in a relationship, constant communication and transparency, and work with each other. You know, at the end of the day, we're both human, right? I've grown up a certain way, they've grown up a certain way. But when you come into a relationship, it's not, you have to you have to expect challenges. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows every single day, regardless of what you do. If you do, you're in that 1%. But other than that, you are going to come across differences. You are going to come across disagreements, and it's all in how you handle them, right? And always, always, always come to a resolution. Now, you can agree to disagree, but if you can't come to a resolution, then I suggest moving on from that relationship because um, you're never going to get what you want out of it. So, and you're just going to be fighting a brick wall of filling a cup filled with holes, right? It'll never fill up. So, just a couple of pieces of advice, words that um, are kind of pertinent on this. But I want to give you something to reflect upon, and this is the reflection I want you to use. Who were you before them, and who are you becoming without them? Think about it. Again, probably have more episodes on this, simply because it helps me process everything that's going on currently, and I only look to get you know I can't wait to see the version of me in 3 months, and it's something that I use this as I put this right on my shoulder like the chip on my shoulder, and that's how I focus it, that's how I process it, because life doesn't stop and we have to continue to move forward. And with that being said, I am going to go to church today, and see if that brings me any more clarity. I will say, um, for this, I'll have my daughter, and I know she likes going to the kids class too, so it'll be a good time for her, a good time for me, and really looking forward to it. But till then, we're in November, another month, right? We got 2 more months to the end of the year, 2025. I will say it started off great. Hasn't gone quite to plan, but at the end of the day, it's going to end great. And that's our only hope, for that, is just being able to understand that, when life doesn't stop, we got to keep going forward. And at the end of the day, what is darkness in the moment will eventually turn to light. And you have to keep that on the forefront. But all right, T-Tan fam, appreciate it. Talk to you later.